Despite a chance to tie the game late for the Saints, they fall short against the Rams and drop to 4-8, kind of killing their playoff chances. But I think this actually could be a good thing for New Orleans in the sense that there's a brighter and bigger picture to talk about, whether it's the defense, the O-line, and we'll discuss it all right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, Who Dat Nation? Welcome back inside another edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. I'm your host, Chris Rizvoglu, and as always, we're brought to you by Scott Fickner, injury lawyers who've been injured in any kind of accident, car, truck, 18-wheeler, or hurt offshore. Scott Fickner handles it all. You give them a call at 504-500-1111 for a free consultation. They'll always fight for the win. The Darren Rizzi era has finally had its first loss coming at the hands of the Rams, 21-14 in a game where the Saints pretty much time of possession-wise dominated the first half, and then in the second half, you saw all the flaws of a team that doesn't have nearly enough talent and unfortunately has battled a plethora of injuries over the last couple of months of the season, and it all kind of just formed together to create a pretty frustrating loss. I think for the Saints, you're going to look back at this game and think in the first half when you are dominating time of possession, and in the first quarter alone, you held the ball for 14 out of the 15 minutes, and you only have 3 points to show for it. I think it's pretty brutal, and I talked about it during our halftime show. I thought the Saints shouldn't have been up 6-0. It should have been either 13-0 or even greater than that, 10-0 at the minimum, and to not take advantage there. You knew the Rams were going to make halftime adjustments, and it all kind of played out for New Orleans. So that was a big factor. You dropped to 4-8. I know the NFC South is a mess right now. Falcons are in free fall. Buccaneers aren't good enough. Panthers have been showing a little life here and there, but even then, that's not a playoff caliber team. You kind of kiss the playoff stuff goodbye. I know they're 2 games out, but you look at this schedule, you're going to play the Packers on Monday night at some point. That's most likely a loss. You're going to play the Commanders in the Dome. I don't think they're going to have a defense capable of stopping that offense. If the version of that offense that we saw today for the Commanders shows up, that's going to be tough. And then even some other games, the Buccaneers game to end the season, division games are a toss-up. And sure, Giants, Raiders, they'll be favored, and I expect them to win both those games. I mean, those are 2 teams vying for number 1 pick. But let's just be really honest with ourselves. This isn't a playoff team, and that is okay, because I think the one thing the Saints have to start doing now is thinking about the future. And every game that they have going forward, you're doing an evaluation from a week-to-week standpoint, but you got to start evaluating for the future. And I think for New Orleans, there were some things today that you saw that, man, you got to figure out. You got to get another running back. That's a problem. You can't just have everything on Alvin. And I don't think Alvin is that type of guy anymore where you put everything on him. I don't think that's fair at this stage in his career. Offensive line, they need more juice, but they also need to get healthy, right? No Lucas Patrick, no Eric McCoy today. You lose Nick Saldiveri to injury, so the injuries are kind of piling up in the O-line. Wide receiver room, you lose Olave and Shaheed to injuries. Obviously, that stinks, but I mean, they've had guys step up. MVS stepped up. Dante Pettis stepped up. Kevin Austin stepped up. So they're scheming players open. That doesn't seem to be the biggest problem. Quarterback, you guys know how I feel about Derek Carr. I think he is a limited quarterback, and he is what he is, the good and the bad. So at some point, they'll upgrade. I just don't know if it'll be this offseason. But defensively is where I had the biggest problem with this game, and I think we saw the Saints' biggest issues on full display. I think for New Orleans, maybe one of the few bright spots today was Brian Brzee as a pass rusher, but defensive line, they just get bullied in the trenches to no end. We're talking about a D-line that gave up over 150 rushing yards, and honestly, if the Rams just decided to run the football the entire game, they probably would have taken the lead from earlier. They just didn't want to commit to the run fully until the second half, and when they did, obviously, it worked out well for them. Kyren Williams at 6.9 yards per carry. Blake Corum, over 5 yards a carry. So, moving them in the run game, a big problem. And I think for the Saints, they just don't have that pass rusher, that elite pass rusher that can make a difference in this game. The Rams, even though he's just a rookie, they have that guy. Jared Verse, 6 quarterback pressures today. Just insane performance from him, but also insanely stupid from the Saints to put a tight end on him multiple times. They had Juwan Johnson matched up against him. That was a mistake. End of the game, you need a touchdown, first down, anything to extend the game. And you have Foster Moreau lined up against Jared Verse, who's been kicking your offensive tackle's ass all game. What do you think a tight end's going to do against him? So, that's just bad coaching. But I think the Saints, you saw it today with the D-line. They get pushed around in the run game. They don't have an elite pass rusher that can make that big-time play. Chase Young hasn't been that guy, obviously, for them. that some of us hoped maybe he'd give them a boost. He really hasn't been that dude. So outside of Brian Brzee making a couple plays from a pass rushing standpoint, I think this is one of those games where, you know what, if the Saints draft a defensive lineman in April, I don't want to hear anyone complaining because this group needs a lot of help. They need a run-stuffing defensive tackle. They need an edge rusher. They need to get younger in the front seven, and that's something we've been talking about for a while. And then even the secondary. I talk about the D-line needing to be revamped. I think the Saints have to figure out, what do you want Alontae Taylor to be? Do you want him to be this like hyper-aggressive slot corner that makes a ton of plays all over the field, which he can do? Like there's no denying what he did prior to them trading Marshawn Lattimore and Paulson Debo getting hurt. But let's be really, really honest with ourselves. Between him and Kool-Aid McKinstry, I think Kool-Aid McKinstry is the far superior outside cornerback right now. And Alontae Taylor, I think, just makes too many mistakes. Whether it is flags that are coming in nonstop, or it's just not having that ability to play outside corner as well as we thought he'd be able to when he flashed during his rookie season in 2022. So there's a lot of questions on this defense. Safety needs help. I think you got to get younger at linebacker. We all love DeMario. He's a Saints legend, but age is catching up with him finally. Tyrann Mathieu had about a gazillion injuries this year, and I'm sure he'll continue to fight through them. But at some point at that age, when is enough enough? So this defense, I think today, more than anything, especially in the second half, we finally saw all its flaws on display. And it's one of those where, better coaching, sure, that could help, but I just don't think they have the firepower. And I think for New Orleans, 4-8, they kind of are what their record says they are, and they have the look of it, right? They're not able to make explosive plays on defense. They're not able to impose their will in the run game, and you see that problem. So that, for me, was my biggest takeaway from this game was, man, I didn't love the way the defense looked at all. I thought that, for all the good they did in the first half, Matt Stafford looked great in the second half. Puka Nacua had his way. Kyron Williams ran all over the field. The only guy who really didn't do anything was Cooper Kupp, and so be it. Whoop-de-doo. I mean, he's not the type of guy that makes those huge explosive plays. He'll beat you with a plethora of receptions, but it just was not the type of performance you want to see from the Saints defense. It was more so what we were accustomed to seeing right before Dennis Allen got fired. They kind of reverted back to that. So that part was a little disappointing. That's not the entire reason why they lost. At the end of the day, they only put 14 points up. And, I talked about it. That first half, not being able to take advantage on those first two drives, that killed them. There's no question about it. And I think things, unfortunately, are going to get worse for the Saints offensively for the last 5 games of the year because they lost Taysom Hill to an injury. And before I talk about that and what I kind of think this means for the team moving forward, though, I want to get a quick word from one of our sponsors, Scott McNair.
And Jonathan Williams brings it all the way back from the 20-yard line.
What a terrific way to end the first half.
And tonight's game is brought to you by Scott Vicnair Injury Attorneys. They always fight for the win.
You mean attorney? It's one lawyer. Scott Vicnair?
No, there's 2.
Brad Scott and David Vicnair.
Well, it's confusing.
That it is. They could have picked a better name.
Scott Vicnair, Injury Attorneys, we fight for the win.
Once again, thank you, Scott McNair, for being part of the program. We greatly appreciate it. So during this game, not only did the Saints lose, they lose their Swiss Army knife in Taysom Hill to a knee injury, was immediately ruled doubtful, didn't look good. The cart came out. Players on both teams, obviously, were kind of dapping him up as he was getting off the field. And it's a devastating injury. Taysom Hill's the type of guy that makes you love watching football on Sundays. It doesn't matter what position the Saints put him at. He simply goes out there, puts his helmet on, and does his fucking job every single day of the week. And I think for Taysom going out, this is really going to hurt this offense. I think Clint Kubiak is at his best when he's able to use Taysom Hill, whether it's as a lead blocker, whether it's as a runner, whether putting him in motion, kind of using him as that chess piece to dictate what he wants to do, see how the defense reacts to Taysom Hill, and go from there. And to lose him, it's going to put a lot of pressure on Kendra Miller when he comes back. Can you be that complimentary guy to Alvin? Now, I will continue to die on this hill. I think Kendra Miller could be a good football player if he stays healthy. The problem is he's never healthy. But that's going to put pressure on him. It's going to put pressure on this tight end room, which isn't very good. It's one of the weaker groups in the NFL, in my opinion. And I just think for Clint Kubiak, it's going to change the way he calls games. I think for the Saints, whether it's short yardage situations or those gotta have it, downs, I think they always rely on Taysom Hill. And for the most part, Taysom Hill has rewarded them by picking up first downs in those spots. And to lose him is crushing. I think for me, and I can't speak for everyone, he's one of my favorite players I've watched for the last 10 years when it comes to the Saints. I think that, the grit that this guy has, the determination, and I think the willingness to change your position and do whatever the coaching staff asks of you is something that a lot of guys won't be able to do. So to lose Taysom Hill is devastating. Now the question is, at this stage in his career, what's the status of the injury? How severe is it? How does it affect him for next year? Because at this point with 5 games left and him getting carted off, it's hard to imagine that he plays again this season. IR is probably the guess, and it could be worse. This could be an injury where, man, maybe it is 6 to 8 month recovery. Who the hell knows what it is? It hasn't happened yet. I think for the Saints, that's a big problem. And I think for Taysom not having him there, I talked about him kind of being the security blanket for the Saints. This is going to put more pressure on Derek Carr. And I have said, whether people like it or not, here's the truth about Derek Carr. When everything is good, when the O-line's protecting and you're ahead of the chains, Derek Carr could be a good quarterback. But when you need Derek Carr to be that guy and you need him to shoulder the load, he's not going to do it. He is not that guy. And it's okay to admit that. He's not. And for anyone saying, he's getting paid $40 million, he's supposed to be. $40 million in today's quarterback economy is nothing. Let's be honest. There's guys making 52, 53, 54 that are not that good in terms of where they rank at quarterbacks. Okay, so I don't want to hear the $40 million part, but he's not the type of quarterback that a guy goes down, 2 guys go down, and you say, you know what? We still got a chance because we have him. He's just not. So losing Taysom Hill is undoubtedly going to affect this offense. And I think you saw it today too. Like every time the Saints go in a lull offensively and there's 3 and outs, there's just the inability to establish the run. When they go back to Taysom Hill, that kind of fixes everything for them. And to not have that guy, that outlet, it sucks. It sucks for fans because Taysom is obviously a draw in and of himself. But I think for the offense, obviously, and for Clint Kubiak, where do you turn to now? And I don't want to put all the pressure in the world on Kubiak because, I mean, man, look at what he's working with. Down 2 starting offensive linemen. Your starting wide receivers are MVS, Kevin Austin, and Dante Pettis. 2 of those guys were not employed a month and a half ago. And that's not me being an ass. That's just me stating a fact. 2 of those guys weren't employed. So, he's working with what he's got. This is going to be another, kind of devastating hit. And for the next 5 games, any team that goes up against the Saints, you're circling Alvin. That's who you lock in on. And then what? Like, who is the piece on the Saints offense that's going to scare you? I just don't see it. So Taysom Hill injury is, obviously a brutal one for the Saints. There's no question about it. And man, I just don't know where they go from there. I really don't. So we'll see. Before I get into our fan Q&A though, guys, I want to just collect any thoughts I may have missed. This way, it doesn't seem like I'm kind of rushing through this. I talked about it before. We talked about playoff hopes, talked about the D-line. Offense, I just didn't know what was going on there. That last sequence, I don't know what the hell they were doing in terms of how they managed the clock and how they managed the situation. And again, I said I didn't love that Foster Moreau was lined up against Jared Verse. I thought that was a mistake in and of itself. But Derek Carr has been in this league for over a decade. The internal clock has to be a bit faster, and you got to know that pass has to come off, And again, this isn't me saying that Derek Carr is to blame for today's loss. I know some people get, way too animated about this guy, whether it's complimentary or shitting on his existence. We can never have a level-headed talk about Derek Carr, and it really bothers the hell out of me. But let's just call it right there. That pass has to get off. And I know guys weren't open, and I get it, but the internal clock's got to be better. The awareness wasn't there. And it's just weird, right? Because he's bailed on a lot of plays earlier in the game. And for that one to kind of just sit and think you have all day when you haven't been given all day in this one because your all-line has struggled, I thought that one was a little bit of a head-scratcher for the Saints. Again, not blaming it on Derek Carr on this game. The Saints lost for a variety of reasons. They're just simply not that good of a football team, and that's just the truth. But that one was a little frustrating. You want at least to be given a shot, right? At least from, obviously a team perspective, but even a fan standpoint, right? You want to see that pass get attempted and at least for a split second have a hope that they're going to score a touchdown and tie up the game. And to have that be the result is pretty frustrating nonetheless. So got into some of our points here. And obviously you guys can start to, throw in more comments, thoughts, and all that. And I encourage you guys, if you're enjoying our content, to smash the like button. It greatly helps out the channel. But without further ado, we're going to get into our fan Q&A presented by Sunshine, your hometown John Deere. Nothing runs like a deer. We're going to start off with a super chat from Half-Life. Says, I'm not happy about Taysom, but it will be very nice to see if Clint is the answer long-term if Taysom's out for the season. First off, appreciate the support. But yeah, I think that this is another challenge for Kubiak. I think that Kubiak's an interesting OC. The first half, he's always, in my opinion, excellent for the most part. I think he does a great job of scripting drives. Second half is always rough. I don't think he adjusts enough. And there's been moments this year where they just waste the third quarter. And the fourth quarter, he adjusts to what he didn't do in the third quarter, and that part's great. But for at least one of the four quarters, you're just not going to get a great coaching performance from Kubiak. That was kind of the case today in that third quarter. Saints offense was anemic. But yeah, look, no Taysom is another challenge. But how many more guys have to go down, though? Like, either the Saints believe he is their OC or he's not. And truth of the matter is, regardless of whether or not us fans like him, if the Saints go with an outside hire, he's probably not their OC next year anyway. Like, someone else is going to want to come in and bring in their guy to call plays. And if it's an offensive head coach, they're not going to want to bring in their guy. They're probably going to be the one calling plays. So I wouldn't worry too much about Kubiak and whether or not he's the answer. And I totally get your sentiment of that, right? It's another challenge. How does Kubiak adjust to that challenge? But he's already had a bunch. No Olave, no Shaheed, no Eric McCoy, no Lucas Patrick. Kendra Miller's missed time. So, I mean, they've had a ton of injuries on the offensive side of the football. And I don't know if one more is going to be the difference. Donald says, back to the trash heap we go. Yeah, I mean, this is the reality, right? And, Brandon mentioned it here. I think that this is just what the Saints are. They're a bad football team. They're not talented enough. And they'll probably finish 6-11. That's kind of where I think they finish. 6-11. I don't think any, worse than that. Maybe one game better, but even then, I think that's kind of being optimistic. So they're probably a 6-11 team, and I think for this team, that's all right. Like, it is what it is. They'll be picking hopefully top 10, but this defense, this team, as bad as they've been, this is a horrible year to be bad in the NFL because everyone decided, let's be bad. So for me, I'm not too worried about this loss. I can't be frustrated over it too much. Like, they're just not a good team. They're not. And, it was fun to win those two games. And had they won today, maybe you can envision a 4-game win streak, right? Beating the Giants. Giants have been really struggling, but you lose. And now you just kind of start thinking about what this team needs to do from a building standpoint and finding foundational pieces for this roster because they don't have a ton right now. Saints 41 says, after this loss, the Saints will have a true head coaching search. Thanks, Rizzy, but you ain't him either. Look, again, I'm going to keep saying what I've been saying. I need to see the other 5 games play out too. How do you respond to everything? I thought the Saints came out and looked really good. The problem was in that first half, when you have 2 really good drives like you did and you're dominating time of possession, to walk away with 3 points is inexcusable. And that will haunt you. And no matter what team you are, right? You could be high flying. You could be scoring a lot of points. When you leave opportunities like that on the board, it's going to come back to bite you in the ass. And the Saints aren't good enough to be that type of team where they can make up for it later. So, for Rizzy, he's got 2 wins, got a loss now. Let's see how the next 5 games go. That said, the Saints, regardless, they can win the next 5 games. They should be conducting a thorough search because they just got off of not conducting a thorough search. And that led you to Dennis Allen, king of the doofuses, who is one of the worst coaches in NFL history. So they will be conducting a thorough search for sure. And the question is, who ends up being that guy? I don't know. I really don't know. But let's let the next 5 games go too. Just have a better evaluation of Rizzy. Again, I don't think the Saints are going to hire him full-time, but let's see how the next 5 games go too to see how he responds. And now he's going to have another opportunity. How does this Saints team, after a loss where you kind of feel like it's time to turn out the lights, how do they respond? Jerry G says, oh, well, I'm not mad. Yeah, I mean, nothing really to be too mad about, Jerry. Raheem says Kubiak needs to be fired. I'm indifferent about Kubiak. I think there's some good with him. I think there's some shit with him. So whatever ends up happening, I really don't know. I don't have a strong opinion on whether or not they bring him back. I think he makes some glaring mistakes. I think that if the Saints go with an offensive head coach, you might as well, kind of move off of him anyway. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Margaret says, hope Taysom's okay. I hope so too. But, when he gets carted off like that, you probably just think the worst in that spot. Saints 41 says, Saints roster not deep enough. I want a new head coach. And Nola, thanks, Rizzy, but you ain't him. Mr. Game & Watch says, I had a feeling they'll lose this game. Felt like they weren't ready given the circumstances they have. It could be that, but honestly, I just think it's a talent thing, right? Like, look at these 2 teams. Rams aren't, world beaters, obviously. They've kind of been just dancing around 500 all season long. But when you look at the Saints, who is that guy that's going to make a game-changing play for them offensively if it's not Alvin? Tough to say. Who is that guy on defense that's going to turn the momentum around? They don't have one. So when you get your ass kicked in the run because you don't have those bodies and you haven't had those bodies all year long, I don't think it's that they weren't ready. I don't think they have the guys. And to me, that was the takeaway. I didn't come away from this Saints game being like, oh my God, coaching staff's a disgrace. They should have won this game. No, I just don't think they're good enough. And, if people don't agree with that, that's fine. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. But I don't know how we watch this Saints team and think anything else other than that. They're just not a good team. Bayou Boys 5-4 says they robbed their momentum early. That was PI on Juwan Johnson. Should have been first and goal from the 5. It was all downhill from there. Look, but, they also had some back-breaking penalties. Alvin scores a touchdown, an eligible man downfield on Fuaga. You call that back. Trevor Penning with the low block, which stupid call in my opinion. I did not think that was worthy of throwing the flag for. But the refs did, and, so be it. Like, that's just what happened. Forgive says the identity of this defense is holds and PIs and giving up over 7 yards of rush to whatever running back is in the game, hoping for a complete defensive overhaul, and Adebo is miles ahead of Alante. Yeah, Adebo is definitely better than Alante as an outside corner. I don't think it's a question. And at least with Adebo, there were bad plays, but you always knew by some miracle this dude was coming up with an interception. And yeah, you didn't know when, you didn't know how, but it was going to happen. And with Alante right now, it's just been all bad and not enough good to kind of overcompensate that, I just think that for them, that's been a big problem. And we'll see. El Mendoza says it is what it is. Either way, I recommend a complete overhaul on the defense and offensive staffs. Yeah, I'm cool with that for sure. I think defensively, absolutely. Offensively, yeah, I'm also cool with that. I think the Saints team needs to find its next identity. So for the next 5-10 years, there's a brand of football that we can kind of assimilate with being Saints football. Because right now, what is the Saints identity? Truthfully, like even when they won the last 2 games, what do the Saints do well that separates them from other teams? I can't name it, right? They're inconsistent on offense. They're inconsistent on defense. They don't get after the quarterback enough. They don't protect the quarterback enough. And yeah, that's about it. They don't have a ton of guys that you feel like, hey, every team would be dying to have that player on their team. That's the truth. The roster's just not that good, and they need to find their identity. So I'm okay with them kind of overhauling stuff. Joshua says, tackling has killed us all year, and these injuries don't help, but Taylor is killing us with these PIs in the biggest spot of the game. It just pisses me off. Yeah, Alante is not an outside cornerback. I think at this point, how much more do we have to see? I understand why he's still out there. Saints don't have a lot of bodies. They're trying to get a determination, but it's just what it is what it is, right? When you see that many times, and he's struggled the last 3 games, kind of who he is. And it sucks, but it's the truth. Jay Rambo says Alante is not better than Adebo for the 10th time. Derek Carr just reassured us that we need a quarterback who can win us close games like this. Yeah, I mean, I didn't need that last drive to kind of be assured about that. Personally, I've said Derek Carr is a very limited quarterback. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Saints do need a quarterback upgrade. There's no question about that. And my hope and dream for this team is that at some point in the next couple of years, they can find that quarterback that all of us are kind of gravitating towards. And we no longer have these polarizing discussions about whether or not this guy's good and he's holding the team back and he's overpaid. Like, I just hope we all have a quarterback that we're in unison on. Because honestly, post Breeze, and that is understandably so, right? You don't lose a Hall of Famer and instantly replace him overnight. I think there's rare examples. You only get so lucky to go from Favre to Rodgers to Jordan Love. I think for the Saints, when you lose Breeze, we expected it. But I'm tired of the debates, right, over mediocre players. Jacob says, you catching the game at MetLife next week? I have not made a decision on that yet. It won't be expensive if I decide last minute, which is good. But I have not made a decision yet. I'm on the fence about it. Tyler says, we really suck, man. I need this therapy session big time. I mean, look, I see this too from Tyler saying that he lives in LA, so he hates the Rams. Yeah, I can't stand the Rams. I fucking hate that team. Don't get me wrong. But, I'm really just kind of meh about this loss. It wasn't going to change the season. Maybe it made it a little bit more fun for the Saints if they were able to go on a little bit of a run here and find a way to claw back to 500. But, at 4-8, roster's not that good. It's tough to be mad at this loss. And kind of as Who Dat 712 said, right? The run D's not good. Don't have a pass rush. No longer having Lattimore and Adebo. Your secondary is not as good. Your O-line's banged up. You have a limited quarterback. So just not a whole lot. Not a whole lot of good. He says, I don't know what to say anymore, Chris. Lattimore being gone was felt today. It definitely was felt today. And, as for what to say, I think, honestly, guys, I know it sucks, but we just got to get through the next 5 games, and then we'll see what the coaching search does. But I think once the Saints get that coaching search done, whoever it is, you hope that you kind of usher them into a new brand of Saints football that is actually exciting. Because the Saints have had moments this season where they're exciting, first 2 games of the year, and sure, let's pick the 2 interim games with Darren Rizzi. But outside of that, right, like it's been a whole lot of whatever. And I've always been a big proponent of, in an NFL season, it's only one winner. So you just hope they have more fun weeks than bad weeks. And for the Saints, unfortunately, the last couple of years, we've been given a lot more bad weeks than good weeks. Noah says, where would you rank Derek Carr on a QB list? All right. I mean, someone could count for me, but I'll just list quarterbacks that I'd rather have than Derek Carr right now. Rather have Josh Allen. I'm just going by divisions. Rather have Josh Allen. Rather have Mahomes. Rather have Herbert. Rather have Bo Nix. Rather have Lamar. Rather have Joe Burrow. Rather have CJ Stroud. Rather have Trevor Lawrence. Rather have Jalen Hurts. Rather have Jaden Daniels. Rather have Dak, although that injury scares the shit out of me. Rather have Kyler. Rather have Stafford. Rather have Brock Purdy. Rather have Jared Goff. Rather have Jordan Love. Rather have Caleb Williams. And yeah, that's about it. So I don't know how many I missed. What was that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's like 6 teams in the NFC that I think have lesser quarterbacks. And again, I'm not trying to shit on Derek Carr. He's in that bottom half of the league. Now, he's towards probably the top of the bottom half, if that makes sense, right? Like, I think Derek Carr is like probably the 20th best quarterback in the league. But what does that do for you? It's not much, It really isn't doing much for you. Max says draft a quarterback. Trey Gift says Lat wouldn't have been on the field either way. I mean, yeah, he's been missing time for sure. Kyle says the early drive with penalties that took away Kamara's touchdown, and then Groupie's missed field goal killed us. It definitely played a big role. And, I talked about it at the halftime show. I said, like, those are the type of sequences where you just hope it doesn't cost you. And unfortunately for the Saints, it cost them. It cost them big time. And, they're just not a good enough team to be able to kind of overcompensate in those spots. So, yeah, I mean, what are you going to do about it? Jonas says, get Emmanuel Forbes and slide Taylor back to the slot. Look, if you want to take a chance on talent, go ahead. I mean, it's kind of wild that Forbes has been this bad that after his second year in the league now, he's already been waived as a former first-round pick. I don't think for the Saints, they're in a position where they could say no to projects, right? I don't think this is a talented football team. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you no, but I also don't expect them to fix him, if that makes sense. T Mama says, I wish this was the last game of the season. It kind of has that vibe, right? Like last game of the year, season feels over, because it very much does feel over, especially today more than ever. But we still got 5 more games of this. And if we thought today wasn't pretty, guys, they play the Giants next week. That probably won't be pretty. They play the Raiders a couple weeks after. That definitely won't be pretty. So, yeah, just I was going to say get your popcorn ready, but there's nothing exciting in these games to really get your popcorn ready. So I guess it feels like scheduled colonoscopies watching the Saints at this point with the way they've kind of played. Marcus says Derek Carr sucked tonight. I agree with that. D23 says, I'd like to keep Dante Pettis and Kevin Austin around next year. Those two can play. Kevin Austin just makes plays, man. Just makes plays. Whenever his number's called, you just feel like he's going to step up. And I think guys like that, you have the ultimate respect for. Today, gets a carry, gets 9 yards, gets targeted 3 times, gets 31 yards. Like, just makes plays. One Smoke says, look, we had a chance to tie, and Kubiak and Carr folded. Let's tank and get a good pick. Love Rizzi, but we need a whole new staff. Can't really argue with that at all. I think that's a very fair point. Just Call Me Trey says, was the offense against throwing the ball to the middle of the field or making medium range throws? Seemed it was either throw deep or check down consistently. Yeah, I mean, I said in the first half, I think the Rams did a really good job of kind of just giving the Saints all the underneath stuff, but that was about it. All the underneath stuff, Saints took it. It was fine first half. When you need to have it, I mean, they made some plays late in the game. I think the fourth quarter offense was actually good, so it's kind of hard to rip that. I think the biggest problem is Kubiak's inconsistency as a play caller, right? Like, there's a sequence where the Saints ran for 5 yards and then just kept dialing passing plays. Like, you just picked up 5 yards on the run. Why are you going away from it now? So it's tough. To Donald's point, this team is a front-running team, and I do believe that. Like, when the Saints are ahead of schedule, awesome. Like, that's when Kubiak's going to do good work. When they're not, though, it's usually a shit show. D23 says Carr is the most infuriating quarterback. He'll throw behind receivers, run directly into pressure, and then throw the best deep pass you'll ever see. You know, there was a moment for him where he had shit throw after shit throw, and then he drops that dime to MVS. I kind of just laugh. Like, that's just who he is at this point. And that's why I tell people, like, I'm not going to get mad over Derek Carr at this point. The guy's been in the league for over a decade. He is who he is. He's shown us a million times, you know? I'm not going to kind of, waste any more breath than I already have. Max says time for the full rebuild. I agree. Donald says, we'll finish my sports obsession by watching the Pelicans game now. I mean, God bless you. I don't know if it's still ugly. When I checked before, it was like they were down by 20, like out the gate for them. So I don't know if it's gotten worse. My guess, probably yes, but we'll see. Just Call Me Trey says Saints' only chance for playoff is to win out, which will happen. Also, I'm guessing you're saying will not happen. Also, you notice the pass game was mostly either throwing it short or deep, nothing really going in the medium range. I mean, yeah, winning out is the only thing. I talked about it earlier this week. They had they won today, an 8% chance of making the playoffs. Had they lost today, a 1% chance of making the playoffs. So, they have technically a chance, but it's 1%. Like, let's just start getting ready to talk about the offseason, coaching candidates, who they can add to the team, all that. Forgive says, was AK the only running back today? And I'm done with Kendra Miller. Cut him. Draft a running back with a 4th or 5th. I'm definitely not against them drafting another running back. As for who was on the field today, they did have Jamal Williams also out there, but let's just be real honest with ourselves for this one. Jamal Williams is just collecting a check at this point. The guy's not doing anything that helps this team win football games. D23 says the D is old and slow. It was surprising seeing the Rams choose to pass, considering they were averaging 9 yards per rush at one point. Yeah, every time the Rams decided to throw the football, I kind of laughed. Like, you are gashing this team in the run. Why would you even consider going away from it? So when they stuck with it, it absolutely worked, but wasn't always the case. He says, sorry, but if you think we're winning out, you belong in an insane asylum. Yeah, I don't see how this team wins out at all. I honestly think, and I'm not saying this is going to happen. I want to specify this is not going to happen, but I think there's a better chance that they lose out than win out. I just don't see where now without Taysom too. There's no shot, in my opinion, that this team is going to be able to get it done. T Mama says no red zone scoring. That was a big problem today for sure. Besides 41-7, who's now done, we have 0 playmakers on offense. MVS was a good pickup, but too little, too late. Yeah, it would be nice to have a guy like MVS with also having Shaheed, with also having Olave, having more weapons to feel like, we don't need MVS to go for 100 yards today, because that's just so unrealistic. He's been a fun story. He's had some good plays for the Saints, but let's be real. It's just this team's just not good. It's not good. D23 says Brzee has good pass rushing skills, but is an absolute liability against the run. He was getting blown off the line of scrimmage for sure. Louisiana Sports says fans really thought we had a chance of winning out. Let Eric McCoy sit and get healthy for the year. Yeah, I think with McCoy, this is how you play, right? If he gets cleared to play, he's 100% or close to 100%, and he wants to play, I think you put him out there. But, if he was questionable this week, why don't you just sit him another week, and then he should be a full go for the game after? That's just the way I view it. Look, Saints are going to do whatever they think is right, but I think when you're in this position, you could be a little bit more patient with guys' returns. Louisiana Sports says our entire D-line is a liability against the run. I know PFF grades aren't everything, but all of our DTs are ranked in the bottom 20 at their position. Yeah, you see it on tape too. So it's the rare times where, all right, PFF's kind of accurate there. Jay Hoodie says, surprise, surprise, the Saints never got to stop when they need to. I'm not even mad that, though, keep losing New Orleans. In the long run, it'll probably be better off for this team. My Tai says, yes, let's get rid of Kubiak. Hudat712 says, as much as I love Taysom, relying on a 34-year-old wild card player is a good sign. No, it isn't. And again, that's why, his injury, you don't feel it today because he got hurt late in the game, but you're going to see it the next 5 games, right? The Saints are going to have moments where they're going to be like, well, where the hell do we turn to next? Because they don't have that answer, because he's been the answer, but they don't have that guy now. And I'm very fascinated to see where they go now, Taysom Hill playing his last game against the Rams, a loss, is the most depressing way to end this season. I agree, man. I agree. One Smoke says, I get we have a lot of players hurt, but we still got to question Kubiak's play calls in crucial situations. I agree. Guys, I want to make it very clear. I am not like pro Kubiak. Now, I'm not anti Kubiak. I'm indifferent. I think he does some things really well. I think some things he just does not adjust quickly enough. And that's just where you're at. He's kind of like a middle of the road type of guy. I just don't think he's a game changer at OC. Would have loved to have Kendra Miller available this game too. Thanks, DA. Yeah, him putting Kendra Miller on IR out of spite has to be the worst thing I've ever seen. Like, to do that as a coach, like, are you for real? I don't get it. I don't get it. But you know what? That's why he's not a head coach anymore. He's not that guy. Kyle says Alontae Taylor does not belong on the outside. I agree. Dr. Williams 504 says this whole team just needs to go and the coaching staff. Bullshit. Max says Kamara, Kool-Aid, Alontae, Penning, Fuaga, Warner, Olave, Shaheed, Granderson, McCoy are the core. Everything else can go. Yeah, I pretty much agree with that. And even Alvin, we love Alvin, but how much longer is going to be part of the core? Probably just the 2 years on the contract. That's about it, Dr. Williams says Alvin dropping passes, he's the captain of the team. Yeah, there was an argument about that on social media. A lot of people like, Alvin, poor throws. I know they're not great throws, but he's Alvin Kamara. He's got to catch those. And, those hurt. And he's had a lot of those this season. This is not just a one-off. It's been a lot of moments where Alvin just hasn't made the easy play. And again, Alvin still has had a relatively good season. Like, I've not soured on Alvin Kamara. I still think he's had a really nice year for the Saints. But when you're that guy, and he is that guy, you got to make those plays. Hakeem says, just pack it up. And in true Carr fashion, when a play needed to be made, he couldn't come through. And Kubiak called the last 2 plays, which were less than desirable. I agree. Trey the Big Bro says, man, we need a clean sweep in the front office. Everything and everybody that Dennis Allen brought with his possum face looking ass. Yeah. Joe Woods, trash as F. Yeah. I mean, the guy has not been good as a play caller for a while now. So now that we're seeing it for defense, it's tough. But I also don't think they have the juice. But again, I am for the Saints overhauling this shit, right? Like, I am for them bringing in a new vision. I think that's for the best. But I also think this roster needs a lot of work. A lot of work, man. Let's keep it rolling here. Michael says, Carr better than BI and Zion. I mean, sure. I mean, Zion never plays. So let's just get that one out of there. And availability is important. I don't care how talented he is. But for the other two, kind of feel the same. John says, what position is at most need now? I think it's got to be D-line, man. I think it's got to be defensive line. Anything else, I don't know. I don't think anything's as glaring to me as this D-line. They don't get pressure unless it's a coverage sack. They don't stop the run ever. So I think it's got to be D-line. Max says it starts at quarterback, pull the plug on Carr sooner rather than later. I think at most it's one more year that we have to go through with Carr. Now, I know fans don't want to hear that, but it's also relative to who the head coach is, right? If they bring in a new head coach and he doesn't want Derek Carr, they're not keeping Derek Carr. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see how that goes. Werner hasn't shown me anything that explains why he's the starter, just constant missed tackles. Why Willie Gay isn't getting meaningful snaps is a mystery to me. Trey Gift says the one tackle Tyron made all year and he comes away injured. The injuries are mounting up for him. They are mounting up. So I don't know. At this point, I know he kept saying he wants to play a couple more years. I got to make a decision at some point. New Orleans Houdat says Carr isn't a good quarterback, cut bait earlier than later. We should have got rid of DA sooner. Definitely should have got rid of DA sooner for sure. As for Carr, what are you going to do, man? What are you going to do? I mean, he is what he is. He's a very limited quarterback. They're going to ride out the rest of the season with him, which is fine. It is what it is. But if you can move on from him in the offseason, go for it. I think it's going to be tough, though, especially because of the financial implications of it. Max says Olave, Shaheed, Austin, MVS should be the receivers next season. I still think they should add another one, though. Like, that isn't good enough for me. I think Austin and MVS have been nice stories, but the Saints also need to add more difference makers to this team. Breeze made the superhuman plays look ordinary, man. I miss him. Yep, miss him more and more every Saints game that we go through. Mike says, for the second time in 2 years, Carr can't win this average division. It's kind of been a nutshell for the Saints, right? Last 3 years haven't been good enough to win a bad division, arguably the worst division in football. Lance says, game plan was good, ball control. We get out coached after half. We have talent, need game-wrecking defensive tackle, re-sign MVS, and draft depth coaching is going to be the difference. I think it's more than that, though. I think they need more than that, though. They need a lot more than just a little bit of depth. Like, they need difference makers. I don't think this team has a lot of difference makers personally. Fred says $62 million over the cap. Time to adjust, except that we need a rebuild. Half our team can sign endorsements with AARP. I think this team needs to get much younger. I've said I don't love that every, level of the defense has a very old player on it that, frankly, you're seeing Father Time kind of show its age there. And whether it's Tyron, whether it's DeMario, whether it's Cam, they gotta get younger. They got to. Quincy says Saints acting like the Pelicans. Mo says, I watched this game with no expectations. I didn't care if they won or lost. Just happy days gone. Next year will be fun. If they get the right coach, the mood will change for sure. All I ask is whoever the coach is next year, I don't want us to feel like the Saints are drawing dead by October. And that's kind of how we felt the last 3 years. October, November is supposed to be fun times. They've been dead. So now we're in December. They're beyond dead. It doesn't have that kind of luster for them, Lance says Kubiak is auditioning, same as Riz. Today's loss didn't help. I think that's fair. I'm realizing Clemson players aren't that good a league. Shout out to Stephon Anthony. Heath says, thanks for your service, Chris. Who Dat Nation, greatly appreciates you. Much love. Thank you for the kind words. But I send it right back to you guys, right? Saints get their asses beat today by the Rams in a kind of poor showing in the second half. And you guys are still over here talking football when there's a lot better things you probably could be doing on a Sunday, Marcus says, beat the Giants and Las Vegas, lose to Green Bay and Washington and Tampa Bay. I think that's kind of why I say 6-11, right? You lose the two that you said, win the two that you said. Last one's a coin toss. Fred says the good news is it seems like we have our two offensive tackles figured out. Going into the season, we all thought Penning was going to be a bust. He still needs to get better at pass protection. He got his ass whooped by Jared Verse today. Luckily for him, everyone got their ass whooped by Jared Verse today. It wasn't just exclusive to him. So I definitely feel like he'll be the starter next year, which is great. But, it wasn't his best showing today. Who Dat 712? I know it doesn't mean much in the grand scheme of things, but for a little minutia, are you sure Lawrence over Carr? Lawrence has been quite bad this year and second half last year with much better weapons. No, it's not. I'm not sure that he's much better, to be honest. And I don't think he's ever going to reach his full potential at all. I just think from an age standpoint, if I had to pick one, I'd rather have him. But if we're just talking about production-wise, no, I don't think Trevor Lawrence is that good of a quarterback. I think he's limited just like Derek Carr, if I'm being quite honest. So it's all preference, but no, I do not think he's a special talent. I do hope he recovers quickly because that man got absolutely blasted today on that dirty hit. Forgive says, I wonder if AK's broken hands causing these drops. It's possible. Hale Mendoza saying, all I'm saying is if Joe Burrow wants out of Cincy, I'd make that deal. I mean, who wouldn't? Who wouldn't? T23 says Bryce Young hasn't stopped smiling since he beat the Saints. He's looked like a completely different player since that game. Unfortunately for him, not enough. I believe the Bucs won in overtime, but he's looked a lot better. Groupie's got to go. I disagree, man. I know Groupie missed that one kick, but I believe, and let me go check just to be sure. I don't want to be wrong on this. I believe Groupie's got 2 missed kicks the entire season. That was his first missed field goal since October 27th. So, I'd pump the brakes on that. JW says, I agree with you, Chris. Another wide receiver is needed. They really need a true wide receiver 1. Olave's a wide receiver 2, masquerading as a 1. Also, his future's uncertain. I mean, that's another reason why I think you got to go and get, another wide receiver. For me, I think that's, I think you got to go get another one. Whether it's the Olave injury, Shaheed's injury, just needing more depth, there's a plethora of reasons, Cam says both Saints and Pels are trash. I think that's fair. Mo says Will Johnson, if available, or quarterback in the draft. I mean, I don't know if he's going to be available because I think he's probably going top 6, 7. And I don't know if the Saints are going to have a top 6 or 7 pick. But if he's available, that is a blue chip prospect. So I would be for that. Absolutely. Hel Mendoza says, thoughts on rivalry week in college football. What the fuck did we just witness this past Saturday, man? Michigan upsets Ohio State, brawl at midfield. Cops are using pepper spray. North Carolina, NC State, brawl over there. Florida State, brawl over there. Arizona State, there's a brawl. I guess everyone just had a meeting that they were going to be planting the flag, and then the losing teams were like, hey, we're not standing for this shit. So I just, I don't know. It was a wild weekend. I enjoyed the hell out of it. But this college football, I think, playoff more than most years is going to be fascinating because you would hope the 12-team format, there would have been teams that kind of earned their spot. And as the season's gone along, I'm like, there's maybe like 4 or 5 teams that have truly earned it, and that's about it. You know, I think that there's a lot of struggles there. So I'll get into any more comments you guys have before I get into our closing argument. Before I do that, though, I want to get a quick word from another sponsor, DraftKings Sportsbook.
Getting some holiday shopping done this weekend? While you're at it, pick up some touchdowns. They're on sale at DraftKings Sportsbook. DraftKings has doorbuster profit boosts and bet one, get one promotions on all types of touchdown bets. Grab some TDs with DraftKings Sportsbook. They're on sale from Thanksgiving through Cyber Monday. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code BOOT to opt in. That's code BOOT, B-O-O-T, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in New Hampshire, Oregon, and Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ftball. NFL Plus Premium offer available only to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus Premium terms at nfl.com/terms.
Once again, thank you to DraftKings Sports for being part of the program. We greatly appreciate it. Going to wrap it up with some more comments and then go from there. Max says, Chris, good job. Keep holding this team accountable. Not many media members do. Kudos to you. I've always said it's a little bit different. Like, they're in the room and you got to deal with these people face to face. You can't really be as, aggressive as you'd like to be. That said, this just isn't a good football team. I think it's okay to say that. Like, they're not egregious anymore. Like, I think getting rid of Dennis Allen was good. I think that's where things got toxic. I don't think this is a toxic team right now. I just think it's a bad football team. D23 says, echoing the messages of earlier commentators, you doing this stream allows me to vent where needed. Appreciate you, man. And that's kind of what I want. That's why I like this format of having you guys comment. I think it's the best way to kind of have the whole Who Dat Nation interacting a little bit and getting an idea of where everyone's at after each game, win or loss. And, obviously, for a game like today, more on the somber side. Alpha Omega Stable says, Carr has never had a decent O-line to play behind. Greetings from Florida, USA. Helmut says, yeah, this season hasn't turned out the best. However, nothing brings me such sweet joy than seeing the Falcons absolutely shitting themselves in division. They're going to be an interesting spot, right? Because they are kind of shitting themselves, as you mentioned. And now what do, right? Do they stick with Kirk Cousins? Do they switch over to Michael Penix because Kirk's been awful? They got a decision to make. Kyle says, missed opportunities, inconsistency on offense, losing in the trenches, especially against the run, is why we lost. Coaching wasn't the issue. Rizzi did well. I thought Rizzi was fine. I didn't, that wasn't my takeaway, right? Like, oh, bad coaching. Just don't think this team is talented. And the Rams have issues, but the Rams playmakers came to play. Better quarterback in Stafford. Puka's obviously a better receiver than what the Saints have. Cooper Kupp, still a better receiver. Demarcus Robinson, good role player for them. Kyron Williams, really, really good running back. Defensively, Jared Verse was just outstanding today. So they're better players, made plays. And for the Saints, they don't have a lot of those players that you can lean on. And that's just the truth. And it sucks, but that's reality for this team. Hale Mendoza says, last thing, Super Bowl picks. Oh, man. All right. So from the AFC, I still think it's going to be Kansas City. I'm so tired of it, but I just honestly think it'll be Kansas City to make it back to the big game. I just think that defense makes those plays, and it is frustrating. NFC is interesting. I think if you asked me a couple of weeks ago, I was going to say Detroit, but how many more injuries can they take to that defense? I think they've taken a lot. So I'll tell you what I think. I think if Jordan Love can cut down on the interceptions, I think it'll be Packers Chiefs in the Super Bowl. I don't know if Jordan Love can cut down on the interceptions, though, because this guy can't help himself. He is Brett Favre 2.0 when it comes to being really loose with the football. But I do think the Chiefs will get there, and I kind of think it's going to be Green Bay at this point because of Detroit's injuries on defense. But if Detroit can kind of play time possession, I think they'll be able to get to the big game. But I just don't know, man. How many more injuries can they endure on defense? He says, could be worse, could be a Jets or Giants fan. That's for sure, man. New York football's in the gutter. in the absolute gutter. D23 says, I hope the Lions make it. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people rooting for them. Kyle says, last year's loss against the Rams was way worse than this. The loss was more competitive, which is good, but missed opportunities to make it a bit disappointing. Yeah, I said last year, right? You were down 30-7 at one point. So you scored 2 touchdowns, make it 30-22, and say, hey, we kept the game close, but they got shellacked in that one. Kyle says, we need more talent in the D-line, so hopefully in the draft next year we get Mason Graham. That, to me, I think that's the guy that you circle right after today. I don't know. They need someone, and maybe Mason Graham will be that guy to help them out if they're going to upgrade on the defensive line. So we're getting close to an hour here. We're going to wrap up with our closing arguments presented by Scott Fickner. I talked about it before, guys, but I think this loss now, 4-8, could kind of put a bow on this season for the Saints. If we were trying to have some miracle playoff run, it's not happening at this point. I think it's very clear. 5 games left. What are you looking for in those 5 games? Can some young players like Penning and Kool-Aid McKinstry and Fuaga continue to develop? Can a guy like Kendra Miller, who has missed pretty much his entire season due to injury, can he come in and give a spark and look like a playmaker for next season? Can some of these younger guys, if they get in the lineup, do some damage? Defensive line, what the hell are you going to get from that group? I think you got to start making determinations on who's staying, who's going. Same goes for linebacker spots. So I think next 5 games, you're looking at an evaluation for a bunch of things, because we are heading towards a new era of Saints football, or at least we should be. And I think it's very clear at this point that this Saints team, you put a fork in them, they're kind of done. So that's going to wrap it up, guys, for this edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. As always, I want to thank you so much for tuning in, providing your comments, thoughts, predictions, suggestions, complaints, all that good stuff. You guys have been excellent. We'll obviously have a preview episode coming up for Saints Giants, which I'm sure is not going to be the most riveting matchup in the world, but it is a matchup nonetheless. And we'll have more content coming up this week on the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for the Who Dat Nation.